Hello, everyone. Tracie here, your resident business rebel, and you're listening to Cocktails, Coffee, and Conversations podcast, the show that lets true stories and insider secrets of digital entrepreneur life unfold. Our business world is growing, and as an online business coach and digital product creator, I believe you didn't become an entrepreneur to grin and bear your way through business. So I'll be your guide as we drop in on coaching calls, have intimate sit downs with online personalities you love, and discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies circulating our online world. So pop in your earbuds, tap follow, and join me as I demystify this thing called business.
Your brand should not hold you up from starting a business and doing what you love. But I do want to speak to the piece around, it's not a natural thing also of like being on brand, and it's like,
Yeah.
how do you do it? So I have an easy trick for just like making sure that you're always on brand.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am once again joined by Kristin Lawton of the District Brand Bar. And if you haven't come across Kristin yet, like in episode 11, she is the mixologist behind the District Brand Bar and brings 20 years of expertise in marketing and branding strategies directly to your business's doorstep. She's not just about ideas, she's about making those ideas actionable and accessible. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, because in this episode, I bring her a question that can feel a bit tricky: creating business foundations versus letting things evolve with your branding. How do you balance figuring out client journey, brand voice, the systems that you need with making money and trying your hand at the different options that are available to you in this online space? So we're going to go past the look and feel of aesthetic brand and into the full expression of who you are and what you stand for as a business. So there's never any shame here. And let's go beyond these flash words and these Instagram moments and get you out of spinning your wheels and into more money that actually feels good to make. Let's listen in. Well, welcome back, Kristin. I'm so excited to have you again onto the podcast, where we're going to have another little coaching session, and we're going to hash out a concept that I really love that you talk about a lot. And that is people who are like, they're going all in on their business. They're
Mhm.
trying really hard, but they almost end up, like, as you say, like spinning their wheels
Yeah.
or like throwing spaghetti at the wall
Mhm.
because they haven't actually built these foundations for their business. And I think this is where a lot of that kind of online confusion
Yes.
comes in, right? Because if we were traditional brick and mortars and you were trying to get a lease on something, you had to go to a bank and you have to, create a business plan and you have to do all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And online, it's more like, all right, you got internet, you got an idea, let's go, right? So a lot of times I think people feel like having business foundations is more creating a digital product or
Mm.
becoming a coach about a certain thing,
Yeah.
and then the rest evolves.
Yeah.
So how do you define
Yeah.
like that line?
I know. Yeah. I mean, that is a good point because I do believe in sort of launching your business without it being perfect and that it's allowed to evolve
Mhm.
over time. But I do think that when you get into that, mode of where you're just trying everything and to see what works, that you need to actually take that step back and be like, okay, let's define what my brand is. Let's understand my audience, my marketing strategy, set up those systems, get consistent, get cohesive, and make sure you're speaking with the right voice and that your brand is really shining before you sort of start throwing everything at it. So I do think, like I started with like the website and maybe some services that I was trying to figure out, but I was still very clear about, who I was, who my brand, what my brand was, the messaging. I started with the look and feel and it evolves, but you still want to sort of keep that same cohesion so that people can start to get to know you and to say, oh, that's Kristin, that's the District Brand Bar. This is what she does, and sort of be really consistent with that, because I think that's what people miss a lot with sort of those foundations, is that they start becoming all over the place and then their audience doesn't sort of know where they land on anything, and then nothing
Mhm.
works.
Do you think that's kind of that chameleon effect where, like, because they're trying to appeal and figure out at the same time? Do you
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of that comes from?
I think probably, and I think it is the chasing the shiny pennies too, of like, because nothing's sticking yet, you're very quick to just sort of like jump at a new thing and sort of abandon another. You're not really finding your footing and having those foundations. And when you have your brand foundations in place and you sort of have a very clear understanding of your brand voice and maybe your content pillars and your look and feel is fairly consistent, then at least you have that place to land and sort of you can be trying different things, but they're all going to feel and look very similar. And it's not going to sort of stretch you so far out of this comfort zone where it's not going to work.
Okay, so let's take it back a
Yeah.
bit for people who, because most people who are listening to this, well, they're already business owners,
Yes.
right? So you can kind of have a bit of this like, oh shit, what am I going to do now moment,
Yeah.
right? Or is it too late? Have I,
Yeah.
messed everything up?
Right.
Or it can kind of be this like what could have been my guidepost. And something that I'm thinking about as you're talking is it is a safe place to start,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
that way they can kind of put up some walls of protection around influence
Yeah.
and, accidentally like starting to look like these other people
Yeah.
and getting like real far away from themselves is almost just creating it like you as an individual
Yes.
until you start to get your sea
Mm.
legs, until you start to know what your offers look like or who your paying clients are versus like, your ideal audience versus your paying clients can be very different people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's is that like a safe place to
Yes.
kind of
A
be?
hundred
It's like
percent.
pick words that would actually come out of your mouth.
Yep.
Pick colors that you want to wear or
Hmm.
that you like being around. What
Hmm.
are like some other things that are kind of beyond Canva that people think about with brand?
Yeah. I mean, personality, tone, you're definitely right on that. I think emojis can be very branded and like you can just sort of use your
Yeah.
branded emojis. But I do think, we all start businesses that have some reflection of ourselves, right? It's a problem that we've gone through, it's an expertise that we have. Oftentimes we were our former sort of client, right? We've gone through it. Now we want to help other people. And so, especially for like solo entrepreneurs, like we're also like coaches and service providers, consultants, like we're often the face of our business. So starting there is a great place. And I think, and that's where, the whole like faceless accounts and that type of thing, like you're not really setting yourself apart and you're not giving people a place to feel grounded either. Cause I think it's about you feeling
Mm,
having those foundations to where like you can go off and build your business in a way that feels good and natural and authentic to you and your brand. But there's also, you want people to feel like they have a home, and when you're all over the place, that doesn't work either. But the first place I start is with your brand voice. And I think using ChatGPT and AI to help you define this is like the way to go. My little trick for doing this is to basically like create like a dating profile and give it to ChatGPT. And so you're
yeah.
like, you share your personality assessments and horoscopes and human design. And, so you sort of give it your Clifton strengths, your Myers Briggs, you give it all of that. You tell it a little bit about what you do for your business. You maybe share some hobbies that you like, and activities that you like to do to sort of give yourself a well-rounded profile. And then, give it a chat. Be like, can you analyze this? How can I, infuse my personality and personality traits like into my business? And what it'll give you is pretty accurate description of you and a really good ideas of how you can sort of be more authentic with your brand. And then, yeah, I think it is. You sort of create messages from that and key messages. And yeah, like I have a cocktail themed business. So for me, it's fairly easy to say, okay, well, all of my emojis that I use are all the cocktail ones, right?
Right.
I use
I
cheers.
always use the bourbon glass.
Yeah,
That's mine.
right. The
I'm like,
bourbon glass is in my, like my email name. When an email pop from me pops up, you're gonna see the bourbon glass as well. I always use cheers, at the end of every email, or
mhm,
so you have these like things that start to sound like you. Then we go into the look and feel and thinking about right colors, the sort of photos that you're gonna use, this kind of filter, like are you gonna have sort of a consistent look if you're doing Instagram stories or what your LinkedIn posts are going to be like. So you're just sort of starting to create this like cohesive feel around your business where everything that you're putting out, right? Because your brand is everything external in your business. It is not just your look and feel. That's a little bit of your branding, but your brand is anything that someone can interact with. It can be an ad on Facebook to, you at a networking event. It can be your website, obviously, your emails, your lead magnets. But you sort of just want to have this, like, you pull it all up. What I love to do is open Google my brand name and then right click to open in a new tab of every instance, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, websites, even, all the little like networking sites where your name might pop up. Like open those all up and then just see, like, does it kind of read the same? Does it feel the same? Does it seem like it's all my business? And sort of making sure that you have that like cohesiveness around your brand and that it feels very like unique to you as well.
So what I'm hearing is that it matters more that it is cohesive to you than it matters that it is tailored to each platform.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a little bit of both, right? Like certainly things need to be tailored, right? Your Instagram bio is going to feel different than a Facebook description that can be longer. And something might feel a little more professional versus like informal, but it's still going to be you and your brand and it should still come across in some of the language and the photos and the colors. Plus it just makes it easier to market when you're sort of speaking the same language across
Yeah, I mean,
platforms.
I think of different platforms like whenever you're physically going to different places, right? You're still you, whether
Yeah.
you are at your grandparents' house versus like you're on a date versus like you're at a networking event versus, like you're somewhere else, right? You
Mhm.
just may edit yourself a little differently, or you may wear one outfit versus another.
Right.
If you're at a sports bar versus at a cocktail hour,
Yeah.
but like the essence of you is still the same.
Yes, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll see some new businesses, like their Instagram profile, for instance, like it's a lot of different stock photos based on, the social media holidays or just sort of like a quote graphic here or there, but like nothing feels unique or original. And not like that it has to be crazy unique or original, but I guess it all just feels generic, right? It feels like you copied a template in Canva and you just sort of like created some stuff, but that anyone can have. And so I think when you think about like the foundations, you want it to be like, I'm using templates that are custom to me that I have like put my style onto, or I'm using messaging that, no one else would really be. A lot of people could be using like the same words, but not in the way that you're putting them out there, right? With that same personality and tone that you're using, and with your special amount, emojis thrown in there, and you're not doing it in a way that is attracting the same amount of audience, the right audience. And I think there's just when you have all those, it just starts clicking. When I finally like really like honed my brand and it combined with sort of some like a brand photo shoot and launching a lead magnet, but it all worked together. Everything sort of sang the same tune. I was getting so many compliments about my brand that people were seeing me all the time. The same people that had been on my list and if I was doing consistent social media, but now they're saying, I see you pop up all the time. And it's not that I wasn't popping up before, it's that I'm popping up with that same look and feel, with that same message, with that same just brand feel that they're remembering.
Mhm, yeah, like they're finally noticing,
You're
right?
right.
Because they know that it's you.
Yeah.
And as so myself, I'm not somebody who's comfortable with those things. I
Yeah.
mean, I would be happy if social media didn't exist.
Yeah.
I am not someone who needs to tell, well, anybody anything really. So it does not come natural to me.
Mhm.
It was actually kind of a funny moment when I realized that the colors that were for my company were actually the same ones that were in my closet.
Yeah, which is very natural and how it
You
should
know,
be, honestly, like ones you like
Well,
wearing.
yeah, like the thing behind me, this was my dining room,
Yeah.
and it just kind of became, a part of it. It was just what was,
Yeah,
and I was like, oh my gosh, I spent so long trying to figure out the quote unquote right colors,
right.
and what was going to exist, and I came from a corporate background. I was a
Mhm.
consultant as well, so you had to have this certain persona with this kind of suit, with these kind of shoes, with this kind of facade, right,
Yeah.
to be taken serious. I mean, even down to the kind of luggage that you carried, right? It
Oh
had to be
gosh.
like these kind of brands
Yeah.
and this kind of, well, and especially as a female and a younger one, you weren't legitimate
Right.
otherwise, right? It
Yeah.
was all that kind of bullshit. And so it's like, so whenever you're going out on your own, you're kind of like, well, what is it supposed to be taken seriously?
Yeah.
And as someone who's not naturally a social media person, I'm
Right.
sitting here going, I don't know. I pick things based on what I like or what I don't like
Yeah.
least. Does
Yeah.
that even make sense? Like what doesn't annoy me
Yeah.
versus what like me?
And 100% that's how it should be, right? Like, because even though we want everyone to see everything, right? Only like 10% are seeing 10% of our stuff,
I mean,
you know?
man.
So to me, and I always say with colors, like choosing colors, they should be ones that you love. Like I picked red and orange for my brand colors, not because color theology, whatever says color theory says that, red is power and passion and whatever. It's because it's the colors of a Negroni in an Aperol Spritz. And those are my favorite
I
cocktails,
love,
you know?
I love
And because I won't get sick of the colors as I'm creating content on a regular basis,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's very good idea if you go in your closet and like a couple colors stand out, pick those colors because you're not going to get tired of seeing them. I don't think it matters what color theory says. I do think that I think it should match your personality and sort of your brand personality. Mine is very fun and I like a lot of color and bright and I'm an engaging person and I am definitely more social and so I think if I had this very like calm, muted, like neutral color
Neutral
tones,
tones, right?
right? Like it's very
Ooh,
soft and relaxing. Like it's just not me. It would feel weird, right? It would not feel right to my brand and people would be like, that's weird, right? It's not like I
they get on a call with you and be like, what is going on?
yes,
Yeah.
So I think there is a piece about that, but I do wanna speak to the piece around, it's not a natural thing also of, like, being on brand, and it's like,
Yeah.
how do you do it? So I have an easy trick for just, like, making sure that you're always on brand, and it's basically so there's, like, 5 brand elements, right? So there's, like, your messaging, your colors, your sort of overall look and feel of, like, using maybe graphic elements or photos or the way you use your photos or the way you edit your photos or if you use like bubbles or whatever, lots of lines, like those sort of like imagery piece. There's like the words that you use, and then sort of you really just like your content pillars, like the things that you're always going to talk about. And that sort of has your key messaging in there. And if you just make sure that there's like 3 out of every 5 and you can decide what those brand elements are for you, right? Like I'll throw my emojis in as one of those. But you just make sure that there's 3 out of the 5 elements in everything that you do. It's really simple. It's not that hard, right? Like and if you're doing a LinkedIn post, let's say, because we've been talking a lot about Instagram, so you may not have a photo in LinkedIn, though you should because people will comment on photos a lot more than they will comment on just a post. But let's just say it's just text.
All of text.
Let's just say it's text, right? So, you're using your key messages, somewhere in there you're talking about those keywords, right? I would talk a lot about like simplifying your marketing or, crafting your unique brand, just sort of like making sure one of those phrases is in that post. Maybe pulling out some of the emojis or like keywords that I would use. And then I would make sure that what I'm writing about is part of my content pillars so that people know that they're going to get brand and marketing tips from me. They're going to get something with a little cocktail fun. They're going to get something around like simplifying your business life so that you can find joy, outside. Sort of like the main things that I talk about. It's going to be like one of those things is going to be in that post. It doesn't have to be like this like really hard thing to be on brand, right? Because also once you keep doing it, right, you're gonna talk the same language. The more podcast interviews you do, you're going to be talking the same, thing, right? Like coming up with those words and phrases, they're just going to start becoming natural to you. And it's going to be really easy to make sure that, every time that you're writing a new post, you're writing an email to your group, you're posting in a Facebook group about your brand, like you will just naturally be on brand.
Hmm. It's the kind of thing where it's like, so we can allow this to evolve, right?
Yes.
Because it's not going to stop us from,
No.
putting ourselves out there because that does, especially. Well, okay, I say especially just probably just because of my lived experience of coming from corporate, is that I see it holds a lot of people back who came from corporate because they're trying to figure out a business name instead of just using their name.
Yes.
They're trying to figure out what facade to do because, well, you have to have a facade in corporate, right? And it's like that's quote unquote how it's done.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to do it up here? Like all of these shoulds, all of these supposed tos, all of these haves, come out, and now here you are standing on your own. You don't technically have a title anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have whatever title you want.
I
You
made
don't
up my
have,
own title. Yeah.
it's like you don't have a big, existing corporate name behind you anymore.
Yeah.
You now have whatever your own is. And so like you're trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, and every single decision feels heavy.
Yes.
So sometimes it can feel funner and lighter to look at like the branding
Yeah.
elements, of the business, but it can also be a place where people lose themselves
Yeah.
and has to learn, or they just kind of like hide in because someone told them they had to have the perfect Instagram in
Right.
order to do something.
Yeah.
And how do you get that kind of balance? Because I'm also thinking about my people who they're corporate dropouts, but I also have a lot of multi passionates,
Mhm.
and so they're like, "Wait, do I need 5 different brands because I have 5 different passions?" And where's the, umbrella factor is what I call it, because it's just like a or umbrella corporation, right?
Yeah.
It's like you have like Procter and Gamble, and then you have all these different
Yeah.
brands underneath it. And it's like how do you do things that make you feel legit,
Yeah.
make you feel excited, make you feel like I can stand up, I'm cohesive, people are recognizing me without feeling like there's so much to do or where do I
Mhm.
even start? How
Mhm.
do I not get trapped?
Yeah.
Does that make
It
sense? It's
does.
kind of that.
Yeah, you are not supposed to have this all figured out day 1 out of the gate. Your brand should not hold you up from starting a business and doing what you love. Absolutely not. The way we started this conversation was if you're spinning your wheels and if you are trying all of these like strategies or you feel like you need to spend, a high ticket price on a very specific type of coach because nothing's worked, you should look at your foundations first, right? Because it could
Yeah.
be that you just haven't sort of become consistent and cohesive with a strong brand first before, so you haven't given it a chance to work. Sometimes these strategies, right, if you're putting yourself out in front of a lot of new audiences, it takes them, right, like 7 times to see you, to like remember you, to engage with you. And they need that sort of consistent, like punch in the face of your brand. But that doesn't mean it doesn't evolve. Things change for sure, right? Mine has changed a lot, I think. But I think the idea is that you're not drastically changing things every week, right? You're not changing up new colors,
Yes.
right? You're not
Right.
you're not deciding that I'm gonna go from a cocktail theme to a I don't know like a horse's theme like overnight. Like things just don't change, right? I could one day say I'm done drinking and I'm gonna do mocktails, right? My mixology thing is still the same, right? Things evolve.
Well, not letting it hold you back, but
Yeah.
also not feeling, like, defeated by it,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, whether you are, like, a ex-corporate or
Yes.
multi-passionate, it's like, how do we find this kinda through line? So, I liked how you had started off by saying if you feel like you need some sort of, like, big coaching thing,
Yes.
but really maybe you just need this consistency piece to kinda snap it in place.
Yeah, and I mean, and so one thing is that, figuring out your brand and your marketing and to me it's all about streamlining and simplifying first and getting those things
Mm,
working before you're adding on, right? And the good news is a lot of that stuff is much cheaper than bringing on these big high paying things that might solve your problems that you might that they're saying they'll solve your problems. But what I think when it comes, with those foundations, I don't start or stop at just branding. It's about understanding your audience, what your client journey is. And so I walk people through the know, like, trust path. And it's not just sort of like a catchphrase. It's like an actual journey that you take your audience on. And you need to understand really like where are people getting to know you? Where are you putting yourself out there to be known? And then how are you moving those your audience to the next step of the like? And then how are you moving them to trust and where are you selling them? And I like to really simplify it, like pick 2 or 3 of those options and then really hone those so that you're showing up consistently and cohesively on those marketing channels where people are getting to know you. Choose 2, right? Choose 3. You don't have to be
so
everywhere at once.
So when you say the showing up consistently, I think we kind of get that, but like cohesively.
Yeah.
So let's can we
Yeah.
illustrate like
Please.
with an example? So well, why don't we go meta and say podcast, right? Because that's what we're
Yeah.
doing right now. So how do you do that cohesively if say like right now we're doing voice,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a podcast,
Yeah.
but then there will be like some reels and some static posts to promote this episode of you
Mhm.
and me.
Mhm.
So what does that look like if we're going from like, this platform to this platform, but also one is auditory, one is visual.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, so they're basically, in my mind, they're kind of the same because it's your podcast, right? So, like, you have a container that you're talking about a specific type of topic, right? Or like topics within this larger container of like, the coaching industry and people that are moving from corporate into the business world and sort of like, so you're in that content pillar, right? And you were talking about we're staying on brand by niching down the topics that we're talking about. And so the content and like what you're serving up is very similar. Different issues, but topic wise, we're still in there. Then when you go to
mm,
promote it, your images around the podcast are all going to be consistent, right? You're going to have your sort of main logo around like the cocktails, coffees, and conversation. Your captions are going to talk about the conversation that we had over cocktails. And here is the topic that we covered. And maybe the call to actions are all going to be very similar throughout. When we end this podcast, there will be a call to action that will probably be the same on Instagram. And so I think, even just sort of when you are introducing the topic on the podcast, when you're introducing the guest on the podcast, you're bringing it around. It's like why you invited me on the podcast and what we're talking about and how it relates to your audience. That's all messaging around your brand, right? Because you're talking about like your
mm.
business, your audience, the topics that you talk about, how you are infusing your brand values into it by making sure that there's these transparent conversations, you know.
I'm
So,
like, yeah,
right?
it's a perfect meta illustration. Yeah, so this cohesiveness, even though we're moving from an auditory to a visual platform,
Yeah.
it's still because brand versus branding
Yes.
includes like all of those pieces that is the wordy bits and it is the
Mhm.
visuals and
Mhm.
then you get to have that through line all the way,
Yeah. And even
right?
though we're listening on audio, right? I still have to go to Spotify where I'm seeing your name, I'm seeing your tagline, I'm seeing the image, right?
Mhm.
And then when I see that image pop up on Instagram, I'm like, "Oh, I listen to Tracie's podcast. I know that image, that's her podcast. Like that reminds me to go back to Spotify and listen to it." Right? So it still is all connected even though
Yeah.
like once they hit play, they're just listening. They still have to go find it. And when I scroll through Instagram, it is the photos that are catching my eye of like, oh, that's this podcast that I want to listen to.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So there is still that visual connection, even if it is like just a little thumbnail,
Right.
in on the play next episode
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So that can be the same whether people are platform hopping, like a
Hmm.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok situation,
Yeah.
or whether they're going video versus static versus audio. Then it all kind of comes in, and I think a lot of it that hopefully people have heard but we can be a bit more explicit about is
Hmm.
how we keep distinguishing between branding
Yes.
versus brand,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
branding are kind of those
The
elements, and
element.
then the brand is that over arc.
Yeah. The branding is like the crafting of the brand, right? And it's all of the things that people see, touch, read, but it all comes together as a brand.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always try to be very. I have little what I call jargon busting moments
Mm.
because it's like we hear these words
Yeah.
and they get to this point where people don't really they lose their meaning,
They
right? They just get
totally.
said over and over
Yeah.
again, and people just kind of quote unquote assume that they know what you mean, and it's like no, it's like let's actually take the time to go back and define them so we can all be on the same page and make sure that we're going back to like source material,
Yeah.
right? So I take little jargon busting moments
I
to
like
make
that.
sure that
At the end of the day, when we are marketing our brand, we are trying to bring in new people, right? Like reach new audiences who are going to get to know us, and then they're going to, engage with us, and they're going to buy from us.
Mm,
And we need them to see our brand and our branding and our marketing, posts and emails and whatever many times before it clicks in their brain. This is who this is. I want to learn from them. Now, there's the rare thing of an ad pops up, a reel pops up, you get an email and you're just like sold, right? And those people are really great at moving them down that client journey really fast. But for a lot of people, it takes time, and they need to see us over and over to slowly build that, jargony know like trust. Having consistency around your branding elements and across all of your marketing helps with that. And that's sort of like one of the
mm.
biggest things that, before I'm going to buy from someone, I'm probably going to be hounded by them via email or seeing them on Instagram or TikTok or whatever several times, right? It's how like Instagram ads work. Like I am a sucker for one, but like if it's showing up in my feed like 5 times a day, eventually I'm going to click on it. And
Yeah.
I know it's them because it's hard to scroll without like it's that same brand, right? It's the same photo, it's the same colors, it's the same message over and over. And so that's what we're talking about. And just sort of like if your marketing strategies aren't working, make sure that you are really attracting that audience with a cohesive brand first.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like if the vocabulary kind of tricks you up,
Yeah.
if it's the kind of thing that makes you nervous,
Yeah.
and that's when you feel that extra pressure because it's like, "Oh my gosh, it's the brand and that means I have to get professional photos. Wait,
Mm.
do I have to do that right now? And oh, do I have to, get color schemes and make mood boards
Yeah.
and charts
No.
and if that's something that sends you to it down a spiral, then let's just just give yourself grace and give that a reframe and just think about it as familiarity,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah. That's a great word.
just as Kristen was just saying, it comes down to that no like trust of people recognizing you, of people seeing you over and over and over again. That is what in IRL world we would call familiarity,
Yes.
right? These are the people in your neighborhood.
Yes. Right.
Like that old Sesame Street song, right? It's like you see them over and over again. You start to feel comfortable with them. You know who they are, at least to give them a nod or a wave as they
Yeah.
pass, right? It's like, it's not stranger danger. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's safe to interact.
Yeah.
So let's start dipping our toe in interaction.
Mhm.
And that is what we are doing with these pieces, is where we're just bridging that gap where we're not seeing each other
Yeah.
walking our dogs because
Right.
we're online.
Right. Yes.
Right? So instead, we're just, we're scrolling through the streets of
Mhm.
a stream,
Yeah.
and we're just trying to create familiarity with each other. And so hopefully that reframe can kind of help because
Yeah. I like that a
I
lot.
mean it actually it makes me feel better.
Good. But you're so right, like, and I think,
Yeah.
when it comes to an audience and sort of building that know like trust, they need that like personal connection, even if it's just sort of like
Mhm.
in your mind, right? Like I follow them now, I feel connected to them somehow. And you want to sort of get there quicker, right? And I just think when you are showing like you don't want to miss one of those times where they're scrolling and they don't see you, right? When you're walking down the street and they're on their phones and so they don't see you. And I think when you sort of jump around with that sort of different feel of a brand and you haven't really like gotten nailed it yet to where you are really consistent, like you have to work harder to get their attention. And that's why things
Yeah.
may not be working for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like, to what you were saying about them like looking down as they're walking. But if you're always the person who walks by at 4 p.m. and you're the one in the purple shoes,
Right.
it's like that then
Yes.
they'll know, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like even if they're doing something else, they'll be like, oh, that was her,
Right.
Yeah. And they'll know to like look up and to see you at that
Hmm.
point,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and it just kind of gives that nod moment. And everything that we do in our business, it has to serve the essence of the business, the bottom line, the mission, the
Hmm.
purpose,
Hmm.
right? So whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit business, you have a purpose.
Yeah.
And so like as Kristen's talking about all of this, we brought that connection back to this familiarity, is so that way people feel like that they can connect to you. They can do something with you,
Mhm.
right? And what are you wanting them to do? For most of us, it's we're wanting them to buy from us. We're wanting them to
Yeah.
have that kind of enhanced life because we've joined them in their lives.
Mhm.
Because we've worked together, because they have learned from us. We have learned from them. We've had some sort of interconnection. And branding's not just for the colors
Yeah.
and the photo shoots and the looking good, or the feeling like I've got a fantastic website, or
Mhm.
even that comfortable talking about my stuff. Like, it has an actual bottom dollar purpose.
Yes.
It really is there for revenue, and it
Right.
is there for profit. Part of the whole, like, business and sales
Yeah.
aspect is, like, I'm always telling people that if it doesn't directly line that,
Yeah.
like, come back, and that's where that you can either edit it out for now,
Yes.
and look at it as, like, a nice to have later,
Yeah.
right? Or, like, that, like, you just don't need it yet, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would just say, I was going back to, so I call myself a marketing mixologist, but I talk a lot about branding. And it's because, like, to market your brand, market your business, you need to sort of build that know, like, and trust with your audience. And I think it does start with the brand, because it's how they're first interacting with you, it's how they're consistently going to see you, and how they're going to connect personally with you. And I think that when you have it, it also makes marketing your brand so much more effortless, because everything's sort of in place. It eliminates decision fatigue. You're not going into Canva and saying, oh, what colors am I using today? What template am I using? Or you're not, writing out a caption, or even using ChatGPT to write something out, because it already knows your brand voice, because like, you have that strong brand. It just makes things so much easier on you and on your audience to, like, get to know you better. So I think, just like, I don't want anyone to come out of this conversation feeling, like, overwhelmed about branding. I think it actually is really
Mhm.
simple, because you just need to make sure there's, like, a few little, like, check marks around, like, a post that you do, an email, that it feels like your brand. It feels like the email you sent out the week before, and it feels like the email you sent out the week before that. And that can evolve, right, slowly over time. But it just, like, you really want that audience to have a sense of who you are, your brand values, like, what they're going to get from working with you or buying from you. And that when you're consistent with that, then, like, you really build that trust that way too.
Yeah, I love that, and it really builds that momentum,
Mhm.
right? The momentum that we're trying to go through, which
Yeah.
again leads to that familiarity,
Right.
and that all comes together. And so, as Kristen said at the beginning, it's like, if you've been at this business and you're at this point where it just feels like you're doing all the things, and you're like, well, what am I doing next?
Yes.
Right? Your offer might not be broken. Maybe it is,
Mhm.
maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Your messaging might not even be broken.
Mhm.
It may just be the fact that people aren't seeing it the same,
Yes.
right? It may be a time where we have to stop the experimenting
Yes.
and let it play out a bit longer, right?
Right.
Maybe the experimenting has been a bit too frequent,
Yes.
right? So people can't even recognize that it's still you.
Yeah.
It'd be like finding your favorite yogurt shop, and then the next week it has a whole other sign, and it's like, wait, is this the same it's in the
Right.
same place. I see the same employees, but
Right.
I don't know, is this the same shop or
Yeah.
not? And they don't even know whether they want to go in to taste the yogurt to find out.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And while that's the same thing that, like, people are seeing online, whether, like, they're searching for you, it's like, oh, wait, does she even do the same thing if she's calling it something else now?
Mhm.
And anytime people aren't sure about that stuff, well, then they just have that opportunity to get distracted and move on.
Right.
Right. It adds that extra layer of friction, which
Yes.
basically just means more work for them.
Right.
And so they have to be super motivated to go for it. So a lot of
Mhm.
times they just get distracted and keep going,
Right. Which
right?
is then more
So
work for you.
yeah, so when you're really loving what you're doing and you're like, I just can't figure out what needs to click,
Yeah.
then this could be what is that missing piece.
Yeah.
So what, Kristen, is a way that people can figure out if this is that piece that needs to click? Is it the brand that needs to, like, really fall into place? What's something that they can do with you to figure that out?
Yeah, definitely connect with me. I have a subscription with daily marketing tips, but with that comes my brand and marketing foundations course, where you actually can build it out and make sure that everything is sort of, like, aligned with your strategy, unique to you, all of the good things. But the best way to, I'm so happy to like do a quick audit of your brand on Instagram if you want sort of that quick initial reaction. But yeah, the way to connect with me is on Instagram at District Brand Bar, and there you'll get the links to my fun quiz and my subscription. And yeah, otherwise, District Brand Bar is my website as well.
I love that. Yeah, and I have sent the subscription out to my subscribers to the list a couple of times because while doing something every day is overwhelming to
Yes,
me, I'm more of like a bulk doer. I'm assuming that it's like, yeah, you can
mm,
and do it like once a week.
totally. I
But for those who
actually,
do
yeah,
like to break it down, yeah.
yeah, I recommend starting with just 1 or 2 a week, and Tuesdays are my favorite day because it's the brand polish day, and it's where we make sure that your brand is refreshed and up to date and not sort of like back in, 2 years ago, because again, we have to actually keep our brand up to date as well.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like whether you're somebody who needs to piece it out daily and
yeah,
feel like, oh, I'm so accomplished. Look at me taking this off,
right.
or whether you're somebody who's like, I've dedicated this time, I'm going
Yeah,
for it,
then you got my
then,
course.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. It's like that's a resource that you can go for. So thank you very much for
thank
being here
you.
again and hanging out with us through all the fun conversations that we
You've
have.
been very fun.
Because yeah, oh, good, good. And yeah, because branding is something that I theoretically understand. I mean, I one of my degrees is in marketing, but because of my just personality and lack of wanting to
Mhm.
be out there, it's just something that I just stare and go, okay.
Right.
So I love that you could like come in and bring like a new spin and a new perspective on it. Cause it's like I could tell people the nuts and bolts all day long. And then I'm just like, yeah, branding. It's like there's a reason I play in sales instead of in
Right.
in this world, you know? Yeah, and it's and I understand that, right? And that's why I bring in people like you
Yeah,
because it's like I want this to be a holistic container and we answer people's questions and we bring up concepts that people want to know. So thank you very much for being here
yeah,
and
thank you for
it's
having
been
me.
fantastic talking to you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for joining me here in Cocktails, Coffee, and Conversations. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the links mentioned today. And while you're there, I'd love for you to rate and review the show. And if you have a topic or question you want me to answer, I want to hear it. Head to traciepatterson.com/AMA and ask me anything about business. If I don't know it, I'll bring it up with one of my guests. Until next week, be well and have some fun.